folks. It is 1 minute until 1 o'clock here, so it's about time for us to get into another of our content for artist development seminars. And so, as is usually the case, if anyone has any problems with audio, because if anything's going to screw up, it's going to be audio. If anyone has any problems with audio or are there any technical difficulties I need to be aware of, let me know in the next, 20 or 30 seconds. Hello, Susan. I see Susan saying hello. So, as it is, as we are fully in the throes of the fall-autumn season here in Cincinnati, Ohio, I just a brief warning. I've been very congested for a few days, and so this is just going to kind of play it cool today, and try to keep the train on the tracks. So, repeating myself. Okay, yep, I know what's going on with that. Maybe. There we go. Is that repeat fixed now, guys? Let me give this a second. Let me know if the audio is repeating back. I'm not getting any messages yet, so I'm going to assume that all is well with that. Also, on my desk is my phone, which is set to Skype, so that I can get a more immediate feedback from the folks who are helping me out here. So we're just going to take just a moment to take care of that. All right. Cool. All right. So just needed to make sure that that was up where I could see any notifications that I needed. So, welcome back to another of our artist development seminars brought to you by the good folks at CGBytes. I am Les Garner from 6S1 Media, also the Director of Artist Development at CGBytes. And we are getting close to the end of our character development series, where we've gone from concept to completion on a very in-depth set of products. So we began with concept art. And just to recap for any folks who might not have followed the series so far, we started out with concept art and really built into that these three designs. So we started with our grunt, our basic sort of character here. Then I built onto that the Sarge, and then I'm going to be adding a few more pieces on today to turn that or give an alternate variation on that into this ranger sort of character. Along the way, we've built bodysuit, the all of the underlying clothing. Then we added more elements on to go from the basic soldier up to the Sarge. And then also last week we were wrapping up with the texture and morph development for the underlying character. So one of the things that happened last week that I want to make sure I address right off the bat that kind of threw me for a curveball right in the middle of things was that Iray decided to completely freak out on me. And after the seminar was over, I was able to look into that a little bit with the help of Gina, who apparently had ran into this problem as well. The problem, and I'm going to share this with you guys so that, you know, if anyone else runs into it, the problem was there had been a Windows automatic update that I apparently just was unaware of. And with that update, it altered my video drivers. And since Iray is using, you know, your video card for hardware rendering, if your video drivers, something happens with those, then you'll get that black image rendering that I got. And but I had not had that happen yet. So anyway, with a driver update, all seems to be well. So and I've been working, you know, working just fine ever since. So moral of that story is, you know, when something like that happens, especially with Iray, when rendering freaks out, check those video drivers, because that's probably going to be the cause at some point. So anyway, now that I've touched on that, what I want to deal with today, what we're going to go into is I wanted to take what we have so far, which I already have loaded up in DS, and for the Ranger, I'm not going to keep the backpack on, but I am going to keep the armor and the gear harness, the camo wraps. I'm going to add a few elements to this. There's some things I want to add to this that would probably take a little bit longer than we would do today, and I'm still debating time frame wise as to how much more of that I want to do live for everyone, because I do have kind of a time frame that I want to keep this series on, and we're really about a week, 1 week out from the end, which actually also reminds me, next week is Thanksgiving weekend here, and the seminar will not be live, but will be pre-recorded, and that is where I'll be wrapping things up. So, and the last stage in a development like this, in my mind, is doing artwork, doing finished promo images and renders, which is what we're going to focus on next week, and that's going to be a fun one. That's even though it's not going to be live, I'm going to post it at the same time, so you can still hop on and grab it at the same time if you have that blocked out. But that'll be focusing on a number of rendering techniques, a lot of neat stuff from inside DAZ Studio with Iray. So anyway, where we're going today is I want to build some of these elements to kind of turn this into more of this Ranger concept. Now, in the concept art, I've got these rough, you know, this rough sort of hood and some tattered stuff hanging off of it. And what I want to do is create some of those elements, but really kind of blow out the silhouette a little bit more in a more realistic way to turn it into kind of a ramshackle ghillie suit. If anyone doesn't know what a ghillie suit is, it's when you see military guys with that camouflage on. That's there'll be camouflage, and there'll be, you know, elements of foliage attached all over, and sometimes these ghillie suits can get really dense and thick, and it's neat. Just go Google it; you'll see a lot of cool stuff with that. But there are some interesting techniques that I want to show you for creating something like that in Zbrush and taking it over to DAZ Studio. And the really neat thing about it to me is that on top of being used for this specific design, some of these techniques can be used for a wide variety of things. So anyway, let's jump on into that. So I'm going to hop back over to DAZ Studio and select my G3 Mail. And I already have ZBrush open, so let's just send this on over via GoZ. Give that just a second. Sometimes the screen goes white when it's sending this much stuff over at once. Alright, let's draw this guy out on the stage. And I'm going to pop back and forth to my concept art from time to time just to kind of give myself a clearer picture of where I'm headed with things. So, since I'm going to be building on top of this general shape, the first thing I'm going to do is make a merged copy of all these subtools together. So, sorry. I'm going to go into my merge menu here, and we're going to hit merge visible, and then you'll see that creates a tool separate from what we currently have. So I'm going to append that tool, okay, and you'll see that it's labeled merged. And then once that's appended, if you hit N on your keyboard, you can select what subtool you're on without having to drill through this menu here. So I'll hit N, and I will go down to that new added appended subtool. And hopefully this doesn't freak it out too much. What I want to do now, though, is I'm going to turn this into Dynamesh. And a relatively low resolution Dynamesh, but it's just so that I get a volume created from all of this, all of these elements together. So let's go to Geometry, and we'll go to Dynamesh, and I'm going to turn this up to just under 300, and there you'll see it fills in those holes, and I'm going to turn on Symmetry and inflate some of these elements a little bit, and just kind of push this out a little closer to airtight. I'm not really concerned about that. If I were working towards something for a sculpting market like miniatures or collectibles, then I would be concerned about being airtight. So every once in a while, I might polish that a little bit. And here we can start to see we have our volume coming together pretty well. So, and this just gives us a nice rough shape that we can use. It's going to fit pretty tightly over over all of our other elements. But then we can cut and pull and lift and do all kinds of neat things to get shapes from this that we'll use for other elements. So there you can see this volume that we've created from Dynamesh. You can see it, over the original subtools. And if we want, we could project that and kind of regain a hint of the detail that was there. I really don't care too much about that, though, because this is really just a placeholder to build from. So let's pop back over to the concept art for a second, and I want to build some asymmetry in. There we go. So I'm going to make sure I have symmetry turned off, and I'm just going to brush over generally these areas that I know I'm going to want to pull something from. here. And the back I'm going to turn on symmetry just so that we can work a little bit faster, because I know I want the entire back covered. So now I have blocked off with masking some basic shape. That'll be the basis for our ghillie suit. Now, this isn't going to be like a full-on ghillie suit. Those can get really crazy, but it's going to be kind of a culled together take on the idea. Alright. So then from there, turn off soloing, turn off transparency so I can see. And we'll go to extract. If we look right now, it's going to extract pretty thick. So let's take that down something a little thinner. Hit accept. And that will give us a new subtool. Then I'm going to select the outer shell created from that. Remember, whenever you extract, you get two shells. You get an inner, an outer, and you get a connector shell between those two. So I'm going to select this outer shell, modify topology, and delete hidden. And now I'm going to hide my merged placeholder mesh and start doing some basic sculpting just to get a little bit of shaping in place. I want this to be relatively loose. Part of the point of this kind of garment, this kind of camo, is to break up a person's silhouette against against the background. So we want to go kind of loose with it. I'm just using a clay buildup brush here to pull some of this out. Not really worrying too much about shapes or forms or any of that right now. I'm just kind of really just looking for interesting shape and getting this pulled out away from the rest of that volume. And then, where this tucked back up under there from being created from those other volumes, I'm going to grab my move brush and just pull some of this out, like so. That's going to give us some nice dangling back here too that I like. Smooth that. Come back in with some clay buildup. Now I'm going to start working a little bit more on adding kind of a bit more fabric-y sort of shape. Fabric-y, I'm making that up, you know. But just kind of adding some drape to it. push some of this back in a bit. So most of what I'm doing here is really just some basic sculpting techniques. That's why there's really not a lot to be said about this part. It's just, it's kind of the fun part, is where you're just cutting loose with some sculpting. I want to pull some of this out now, let it drape. And then let's take a look back over here. I'm going to mask some of this and project some of that shape. That way I've got the shape of the underlying elements there to drape from a little more tightly. Here. So let's polish this a little bit. Now I want to add this hood. And there's a lot of different ways that we could do that. So I'm thinking that what I want to do is really going to focus on just pulling that up and then tucking the sides. So let's grab some of this with some masking, pull this up, then rotate it over, polish it a bit, and we're still really just volume building. That's such an important part of things, and I find that if I take the time to build good volumes, most everything else tends to fall in line pretty well after that. And let's subdivide this once. Polish that, and then I'll delete the lower subdivision. And this is just to give me some more polygons to work with for helping define the shape. So next I'm going to take the damn standard brush and I'm going to get a little more sculpty with it. Just moving around the bottom of the of what will be sort of a hood. And let's take the standard brush now. Come through, let's pull some of that out. Start to get a little bit of drape, a little bit of sag in there. So I'm going to glance over at the chat for a moment and see if there's any questions so far. Alright, so at this point, I feel like I can go ahead and Z-remesh what we have. And I may end up Z-remeshing it a few times. I don't want symmetry on, so let's turn that off. And then let's go into a Z-remesher, and we're at 93,000 polys right now. So for this, I want to take my poly count down to probably about 10,000. So let's set this to a value of 1, because inside Z-remesher, that number is always a multiple of 10. I'm going to turn off adapt, and let's hit Z-remesh and let that work for a second. And that's, oh, sorry, it's in values of 1,000, not 10,000. My bad. Let's do that again. It's nearly Z-meshed. That's more along the lines of what we're looking for. So let's polish that once. And I'm going to hold the Alt key and Z-remesh this again. And let's do that a couple of times. I like to let Z-remesher kind of do its magic and refine things a bit. Now let's take it down just a little lower. All right, that's getting down about where I want it. So I want to take a look back over at my concept art again. I do want to pull the sides of this suit in just a bit. Not too much, but a little bit. All right. And here I'm just using the standard brush to well, I'm going to turn my intensity up on it a bit. And I'm just kind of getting some broad strokes pushed and pulled in for the major folds and draping in the cloth. And I want to make sure that I push in a little bit right here because I do want to have some kind of a strap going around this. It just makes it sort of make a little more sense for the way that would hang on. Some good folds in here. Those are the things that really make it interesting. Give your eyes a little more to take in. And every once in a while, as I stroke across the mesh, I will hit the Alt key so that it presses in instead of pulling out. And let's go into dynamic subdivision, just so we have kind of a smooth preview, but without actually having to subdivide anything yet. All right. Of course, the same technique could be used for doing all kinds of loose, kind of casual or natural sort of clothing. I would encourage folks to give that a try. make some interesting sort of shawls or throws or whatever. I don't know what you call them. I'm really not like a big aficionado of women's clothing, but there's a lot there that you could do with this. All right. Then I don't want to change my subdivisions any. I don't want to increase resolution. I like what I've got so far, but I do want to add some tightness and pinching to the draping that I have so far. So I'll hit B and then P, and you'll see that it isolates the brushes in the menu to anything that starts with P, and I can find my pinch brush. And I like this one for some kinds of cloth work, because I'll look at raised areas and just take that brush and also turn on lazy mouse for that brush and just draw over an area, a raised point like that, and then hit 1 a couple times to repeat that stroke. And you'll see how it pulls the mesh together into a much tighter ridge. Very handy. Okay, glance over. Magic Bugs asks, what's the difference between the standard and damn standard brushes? Well, the standard brush it's the standard brush. It lifts and pushes, and that's really it. And it works based on screen space, so meaning that it's going to push and pull perpendicular to your view. It's going to push and pull things to you and away from you. Damn standard is, I'm not entirely sure where they came up with that name for it, honestly. It's like a slashing brush. And what it does is it really kind of cuts these slashing lines into things. And it does it in such a way that it tries to pinch the mesh up around it as you stroke. So, and I use it a lot. It's a really handy brush for a lot of stuff. So I'll never quite understand why it's called standard or damn standard or any of that, because I don't know. The name on that does not make a lot of sense to me, but it is very useful. So there's that. So now I'm just going to keep working around this with my pinch brush. The pinch brush is really handy anytime you need to create a tighter edge or ridge on something. Turn my poly frame off there so you get maybe a little better look at what's going on here. This is nice too, like in an area like this where I might want a curl in my draping. The pinch brush really plays well into that sort of thing. And going back and forth between pinch and damn standard can be very handy. Well, sometimes you do need to smooth it back out a bit. Just about finished sculpting out this claw. It's also kind of a neat thing that you can do with the pinch brush is to just sort of brush over an area that might not already have a ridge to it, and it'll pull the mesh together there so that if you wanted, you could come back over with, say, a standard brush and really heighten that sort of thing. And then if you follow back over a ridge that you made with the pinch brush, follow back over the one side or the other of that with the damn standard brush, you'll see you get these nice sharp sort of edges. Alright, so I'm pretty happy with what I have here so far. Let's just pull a little bit out. So I'm going to come back out of my dynamic view. So we need to get some UVs on this. And I know that this is going to yield some kind of crazy polygroups, but that's okay. Let's go in and start pulling some polygroups out just to try and make life a little easier for doing UVs. Okay, so there I've switched my selection brush. Control Shift takes you into selection brush. I've switched that to my select lasso, and if you hold Control Shift and click on an edge, it will hide a poly loop. So what I did was I just hid a couple of poly loops so that I could then auto group what was visible. And now I'll come back through and group these back together. Then I know that I'm going to want to separate this stuff into some poly groups. So let's just try to find some semi-logical looking places that can do that. It's kind of interesting. By interesting, I mean not what I want. Let's look here. That's okay. Let's auto group that. Of course, that's all still one group, so I need to get poly group out of here. Is that a triangle? Yeah, it looks like we have some triangles there too. So actually, I could be a little premature with my poly grouping. So let's do, let's subdivide this once. Delete the lower subdivision. And then I'm going to Z-remesh that. And let's do the Z-remesh this time at 12,000 polys. And hopefully it'll keep a lot of that ridging intact. And I'm also going to make some cuts on this so that I can force certain poly groups, because I really don't feel like fighting with this. So let's go grab a slice curve and just make a slice right down through there. And then I'm going to place some curves, some guide curves, to kind of help this along. And let's see what we get now. Okay. Should be able to get some better poly groups out of this. And when in doubt, we can always take ZModeler and make some alterations as well. So let's collapse edges. And I'm going to delete a couple of polys here. There we go. I don't mind if it has an occasional hard edge to it either. That's fine for what we're doing. Then I'm actually going to delete a few more of these. And let's delete this poly loop. Oop. Not want to delete all of that poly loop. No sir, no sir we don't. So we'll delete some single polys here, and now we should be able to delete these two poly loops. Get ourselves cleaned up a little bit further. Okay. There's that. That runs all the way around here. And now we're getting closer to some of the kind of groupings that I'm looking for. Almost there. There we go. The whole point of what I'm doing at the moment is just kind of predefining these groups for myself so that I can get clean UVs for UV Master. Let's group all that. And then the hood section is all going to get grouped together. I don't mind if the shape is a little strange on some of that too, just because you know, it is a very irregularly shaped item. And let's just drop a seam right down the middle. Getting closer. And sometimes with something like this too, I will actually make intentional seams that become part of the design. Oh, I'm trying to find where this connects. There we go. There we go. So let's grab this guy and expand once so that I pick up that border group that it left. And then I'm going to hit Control E to add an edge loop around that. And normally I might smooth that and then add those together as one group. But this time I'm going to keep that group because, like I said, I'm gonna actually model in some seamage and turn those areas into a source of detail. So we'll have that. Now let's add a seam around here. All of this together. Oh, I accidentally hit Control G. Cancel that. Control E. And should have just this group left. Okay. So now each of these big panels has its own edge loop going around it. So if I just gently brush over with the smooth brush, you can see how all of that will separate just a little tiny bit. And that's good, because I want this to appear pulled together out of kind of semi-random looking panels. And then some spots, like right here, I'm going to want that to relax a little bit, so we'll just mask it off and polish it. Same like here. Okay, so now I'm going to temporarily close the holes on this mesh. And that's going to create this triangulated wonkiness, but that's okay. That's temporary. We'll be getting rid of that eventually. But the reason I create that, as you guys, if you've watched any of these before when I'm doing some modeling, I go ahead and close those holes so that when I'm using ZModeler, it doesn't completely freak out and give me these strange closed groups that it can do sometimes. So I want to select the large panels, and let's make those their own group. Now we should have just our border groups left. So with everything else hidden, I'm going to go into ZModeler, and I'm going to set my polygon action to extrude all polygons. And now that's going to extrude all of those. And so now we have this kind of lip added around all of those groups. Then you can see here, I'm just going to hide my my closed hole groups. Oh, and then delete hidden. So now we have pretty clean topology that actually flows with the sculpting of the cloth. And then we have our nice little border pieces, border seams created there. So There I have auto-grouped these again so that they go back to being in separated groups. Then I'll select a group and I should be able to expand it 2 to 3 times and start to get a lot of the neighboring seam area with it. So I want to make sure that I kind of group this logically now and get rid of any little hangers on to the any little stray polys that may pop up after I've expanded my selections. And you know, I think because I'm working towards both some model details and some UVs, I'm going to create a duplicate of this. Just hit Control Shift D, and that will create a duplicate of that subtool. Because I'm going to polygroup my duplicate a little differently than I'm going to polygroup the actual model that I want to use. So here in my duplicate, I'm really polygrouping this one for the creation of UVs. So you'll see what that means here in just a moment. When we have a copy of the model that keeps those seams that we modeled in, then we'll be able to use the groups for those to quickly do texturing. So now we need this one. Make sure this is going to work out according to plan. Alright, so now let's believe, yes, we want to group that. And now we can group that. So now we have these poly groups that should get UVs very easily. So let's go to UV Master. I'm going to turn off symmetry, turn on poly groups, hit unwrap, and now let's flatten that. And there you can see we have some pretty clean UVs for that. I'm going to alter my UVs just a bit. And the way that I'm working with these, there's a few different things I can do. Where I flattened it, and I have those poly groups, I can mask them and move them around, or I can just take my brush tool and set auto masking to 100, and then I can just use my transpose tools to move pieces around, rotate them. It's a great way to edit UVs, and folks who have been joining us regularly have probably seen this done a few times now. So, and then a nifty little trick so that I don't have to keep going into my brush menu and turning off the auto mask is to just group all of these shells together when I want to move them all. And then auto group them when I want to work on them separately. So let's group them. And then we'll do a little push and pull and spread some of this stuff out a little bit more. Auto group so that again I'm only working with the group that I click on. I don't think I want to polish these at all. I keep these pretty much as they are. Right. Now let's unflatten them. And something I kind of do about half the time, but I'm going to show you here. I have in my textures a folder that I've labeled UV Master Checkers. I think I'm trying to remember. It's actually been a long time since I looked into this. I think some of these might actually install with Zbrush. But here, I'm going to load in one of these textures. And we'll go over to our texture map menu, and then we can place that texture and see how our UVs play out. And here you can see these are some really tight UVs. Gina has a question. It says, all these seminars we watch, I just noticed the top left-hand corner is two radiant color-looking bars. What are those? I am not entirely sure, Gina. Other side of the brush menu. That's interesting. That's interesting. Yeah, there's a comment from Gina about a pair of gradient bars, but I am not entirely sure what she's referring to. So I may need you to send me a screenshot of that at some point so I can kind of look it up. So I do want to look at these UVs. It looks like this back shell here. Depending on what your goal is, some folks would call this reversed. I personally, it doesn't really bother me that much. But some people, like if they wanted to put text or something on there, they'd get annoyed at having to flip it horizontally. So let's flatten this. And that's interesting. That's not at all something I wanted to see happen. So there we go. Let's just fix that. That's interesting that came unwelded like that. Might just need to do a new projection on this. So let's project again. Unwrap and flatten. Let's unflatten it. See what we get. Also, there are some handy tools inside the UV map menu. So, like flipping this on U kind of rectified some of that. It looks like we've got one shell here, the green one. That's the other handy thing about having these polygroups is I can know what I'm looking for by color. This green one looks to me like it needs to be rotated. So let's just do that real quick. Rotate this guy. Let's see. I'll just reorient some of this stuff. And I really prefer to take up more of the space with this, but I've gotten a lot of feedback from people recently where it's almost like people would prefer, like they don't mind the percentage of space being, in my opinion, kind of poorly used, but they would, as long as they get more proportional UVs out of things. So to me, it's kind of a back and forth thing. You know, it's there's pluses and minuses. I've always been of the mindset that I want to take up as much of my UV space as possible, so that I'm using every pixel I can. But I guess, you know, now with you know, everybody has computers that are, you know, so much more powerful than what I came up working on. I guess we don't have to be so frugal anymore, and so now the concern seems to be more focused on the spread. So if I unflatten that and we turn on our texture, we could even, let's see, let's unflatten that. That's light blue. So let's see which one it is. Is that? Let's just regroup that a couple times until it turns to a color that is a little easier to discern. So it's purple we're looking for. Okay, and then let's rotate it. A little more than 90 degrees. And then let's do a little bit of spreading. Now let's unflatten that. There we go. Oh, and that is completely upside down from what I wanted. So, once more, into the breach. Here we go. Flip it. And let's move that down here. I want to be careful not to crunch up my polys too much right there, because that's where something else is going to meet. But one of the things that we've done, though, is building this with those modeled in seams gives us places that when UV seams occur, it's actually in a place that's really natural, where natural seams would occur in the model itself. So if you break your UVs up based on where natural seams occur, then you're far less likely to have anyone complain about a UV seam being there, because it'll just look natural. Ah, Gina, I see what you're talking about. Yeah, this stuff over here. Yeah, it's just my color menus. All right, so now that we have UVs on this copy, I'm going to hit copy UVs, and I'm going to go back to the version that has those borders and paste UVs. So now with those UVs pasted, if I flatten it, you can see we have these poly groups running around all of our major forms. And it's actually 2 poly groups because it was an extrusion, so I'm going to select the interior group of that and expand it once and poly group it. So now that I have 1 poly group for all of the seamage going around this. And since I know I have UVs on that I like, I can get rid of my temporary copy. So let's just delete that guy. And now we're ready to texture this underlying cloth to our ghillie suit. And I'm going to texture this almost entirely using the noisemaker. Okay, in the surface tab over here. So let's start out subdividing this. And before I subdivide it, I'm going to crease by groups so that I keep nice tight edges around my, my seams. Let's go to crease and crease polygroups. So now when I subdivide that, you can see that my seams, my modeled seams, stay nice and tight. So let's subdivide that up to around 4 million polys. Let's kick that texture out. Then I switch my color to black and fill my object. Also going to turn down my gradient in the background a bit. So I'm going to start just kind of spraying in some color. So let's start with kind of a dark brown. Take my standard brush, set to RGB, and you can see that I still have the auto masking on, and I really don't mind because I want some color variation in this. I want to kind of play to the fact that these are differing panels, and I'm really just kind of blasting in some big swatches of color to get things started. Okay. So now I'm going to move over more into the green spectrum, and I'm going to go into alpha, and we're just going to use some of the alphas that are natively in Zbrush. So let's go, let's grab alpha 25, yeah, 25, let's use that one, and then change our brush to spray. And I'm going to start with just spraying these big shapes. And this is all really just to get some basic color buildup. Now I'm going to turn off my mask by polygroups. Just kind of spray over the whole thing so that now my seams pick up some of it, but they're still, you know, where they started black, they're not going to pick up or have as much color to them. That way they're kind of delineated. There's where we're headed. So now we're going to get into the noisemaker menu, and I really like noisemaker. It has some really handy features to it. So let's mask off first off our seams, so that now noisemaker will only work on the unmasked portions, which is going to be those large surfaces. So now let's go into noisemaker, and the navigation in here is just like in the viewport in Zbrush. So right now I'm control, middle mouse clicking to zoom. So I'm going to start off with noisemaker adding some basic noise. And I'm going to set the strength on this to 0 so that it doesn't actually alter my surfacing any. So remember, there's color, you know, there's texture, and there's surface. So right now I'm altering my texturing, which is my coloring, the coloration, and I'm not going to use noisemaker just yet to alter the surfacing any. I don't want to put any surface details in, any sculpted details. I just want color. So we can alter the way this noise is applied in some really interesting ways using that curve. And then let's just pick a different color for it to operate with. And if I hit OK, you can see the results, but we're not committed to it yet. So I'm going to turn off SUV and then hit Apply to Mesh, and so now you'll see that color is baked into my polypaint. So now we have, those hints of large color changes that was from our sprayed in alpha, and that's combined with more granular color changes from our noise. Now we're going to add some clothiness, some cloth texturing to this. So let's go into noise. Again, we'll edit. This time I'm going to switch to UV. Okay, and the difference here, there are two buttons here. One says 3D, one says UV. If you have it set to 3D, then it's going to project noise based on a 3D planar projection. Whereas if you hit UV, it's going to project that noise based on the UV coordinates. So that's what we want right now, especially since we have these nice shells that are separated. This is going to give us a really good result. So we'll hit UV, and then I'm going to go into Noise Plugin, and let's go down to Weave. Then I'm going to turn off Mix Basic Noise, because that's our just regular dots of noise that were there. Then we'll go into Plugin Scale, and we'll scale that down. And I want to keep this a relatively rough, open sort of weave. And now that we've got that scaled down, I'm going to go back into my editing for the Noisemaker plugin, and we can change things like the size of our actual strands of the weave. So, and then we can also add all kinds of variation. You can do a lot of neat things in here. Sometimes it's fun just to play around with Noisemaker. So here I'm just randomizing some of the color. And of course, any of these settings that you come up with as you're working, you can save presets for them, so you could reuse that in other projects. So now with this one, with this setup in Noisemaker, I'm going to also add some strength to this. And so I turn off relative there. Sometimes that can do some strangeness. So I'll move my strength, and now you can see that it also will alter the surface itself. And then let's clamp that just a little bit more with our curve. And I'm going to turn my color blending down a bit so that we're not completely blasting out the color that we painted. So now when I hit OK, you can see the surface that we get. And if I apply that to mesh, then it will project that as sculpted detail into that mesh. Okay. And I just got a message that there was a question in chat, so I'm going to take a quick look over. Let's see, Magic Bugs, I have it here now. I'm having trouble with Spotlight. I tell you what, we will be getting into some Spotlight stuff in just a bit, so I'm going to hold this question for a little bit later on. But I will say this, though. I have had the problem you're having, and I think it's a bug. Honestly, I think it's a Zbrush bug. Sometimes Spotlight gets a little stupid. So, there's that. I'm going to go ahead and finish up the texturing on all this cloth right now. So let's hop back in here. And the next thing I want to do is do my texturing on the seams. So I'm going to invert my masking now. And just so I can see my colors true in comparison to each other, I'm going to hide my masking. So let's go to View Mask, and we'll just turn that off. So even though we can't see it, if we turn on noise, now we can see our noise applying to our seams. And I'm going to change that because I want the seams to feel like they're made of something a little different. That way we keep some variation there. And let's go edit our weave. And let's make our widths tighter so we fill in the gaps a bit more. And then if we want that to be a tighter weave, we can just crank our plug-in scale down a little further. And then I want to dull the color on that a bit more. Probably need to bring the scale on that back up a touch. Still a bit small. And I'm going to apply to mesh. Give that just a moment. All right. And so I just cleared my masking, and there we have almost everything I want. Now the next thing, we've built up these colors, we've built up these different levels of black and brown and greens. The next thing I want to do is apply just kind of a general color to the entire piece using Noisemaker that's going to give us some camouflage. So this is kind of a neat one. So let's go back into Noisemaker, we'll hit edit and then edit again so it brings up our menu. And now we're going to switch off from our weave to camouflage. And I'll come back out, I'm going to change my plug-in scale. I'm going to turn the strength down on this. I'm also going to reset my curve and turn my color blend up. And you can barely see it there. If I take this to a darker color though, now you can see my camouflage pattern coming in. I'm going to make this a relatively tight pattern. And then if we hit edit, we can go alter our pattern even further. So there's a lot of cool stuff that can happen from there. So now I'll hit OK. And I'm going to edit this just a little bit more because I don't want it to be quite so strong in the way that it changes my colors. Now I'll apply to mesh. Give that just a minute to project those colors in. And now I want to go back into edit on Noisemaker. I'm going to turn my color blend all the way back up, hit OK. And this time I'm going to hit mask by noise, and that's going to mask with that exact same camo pattern. So we've projected the camo pattern in once lightly. Now we're going to mask with it. As soon as it finishes that up, mask with it, we'll turn off view mask. And I'm going to change, in my brush palette, I'm going to change alpha and texture to polypaint mode 3, that's multiply. I'm going to turn my RGB down a bit. And let's grab a color just average from what we can pick over out here. So let's just click on our color swatch and drag out onto our object. And now, if I paint over this with that same color, but in multiply, you can see how we start to build up some variation through the masking of that, based on that camouflage. So I really like that sort of variation. So you've got colors within, you've got this pattern, but then you've got colors being moved around within the pattern. And then we still have some variation in our surfacing between the big panels and the seams themselves. Then the last thing I'm going to do is go into my masking and hit Mask by Cavity. I'm going to turn my masking profile flat. And we'll hit Mask by Cavity, and that's going to mask the deeper segments of mesh. That's going to leave our weave, the lifted parts of the weave, unmasked. So let's invert that mask. I'll turn off my view mask, and I'm just going to paint around a bit, still with multiply mode, and this is just going to help bring out that weave texture that we have in place. And there we have basically the ghillie suit hoodie. That's what I'm going to refer to that as the hoodie for our ghillie suit. Okay. So with that completed, I'm going to set my UV map to 4096, go into my texture map menu, hit create, move from polypaint. Then I'll run my subdivisions down, and I'm going to go to normal map and create a normal map. And let's name this. I'm going to call this DVX ghillie suit pullover. Here we go. Ghillie suit pullover. And I'm going to send that through GoZ over to Daz Studio. And I don't really want to convert that to a subdivision surface yet, so let's hit accept. And here we are in Daz Studio. Okay. And it's kind of nice that the GoZ plugin will apply the texture and normal map into the normal settings when it sends it over. And when it does that, though, it's using a copy of the textures that it's placed in a temp directory. So while it's handy that it does that, if you were to clear GoZ, your GoZ cache right now, which I recommend doing whenever you're finished working, I always clear my GoZ cache. That's under Preferences, GoZ, Clear Cache Files. If you clear your cache file right now, then these textures that are applied currently will disappear, because they're just in a temp file that GoZ and Daz Studio are both accessing at the moment. So we're going to need to save those textures out. So let's go down to our texture menu, hit clone, and then I'm going to export. And let's go to my G3 stuff and Explorer props, textures. Okay. Then I'll say this is a JPEG. This is DVX ghillie suit pullover texture. And it would appear... Okay, so today you guys have probably heard me talk about this before, about sometimes the JPEG plugin in ZBrush doesn't want to work, and today is one of those days. So rather than save it as a JPEG, I'll export it, and we're going to export it as a TIFF. Then I'll clone and then export my normal map as a TIFF as well. And then we'll just convert those here. So let's group it by type. And I think I've mentioned this before. I use a utility called ABIC, Advanced Batch Image Converter. Very handy. So let's just toss these in here. Crank that all the way up. Hit convert. And now that is finished, we can delete the TIFFs. Then here inside Fast Studio, we need to name the material. So I'm going to go into my geometry editor, and you'll see that it comes over. It has a material, but it isn't named at all. So we'll just call that pullover surfaces. Okay. Then I'm going to convert that to the Iray Uber base, and it still has these guys applied. So I'm going to browse, and here you can see when I hit browse, it's going to show you that it goes to users, public, Pixelogic, GoZ projects default. That is the folder where GoZ stores all of its temporary data. So I'm going to navigate up out of that and go to where I saved my copy of those textures. Okay. And then a little nifty thing you can do that prevents from having to do all that navigating again is down here in the normal map, I'll just apply this texture, okay, the JPEG that I just made. I'll apply that inside here so that then when I hit browse, it goes and looks in that same spot. So before I go any further, I want to make sure that I have materials set up on this that I'm good with. So let's go into Iray for a minute. And I have a pile of Iray render presets that I've made for myself. All of these use HDRs that are available for free. And remember earlier at the beginning, I mentioned that next week I'm going to be doing a video talking about rendering and setting up renders and things for final promos and all that kind of stuff. And a lot of what I'm going to be talking about is using HDRs and toning. And what you're about to see is going to be some of that in effect, because I'm going to be using presets that I'll be showing you some of next week and maybe sharing some of them. I'll have to go dig up links to these HDRs because they are free, but they're not mine. So I don't want to redistribute them without anyone's permission. But I can give you the links to them, and then my settings will access those and work. So we'll see what we can get going there. So let's pick something kind of outdoorsy. Maybe something a little softer. There we go. Okay. So the default settings from the Iray Uber shader tend to be kind of shiny, which is not what I want. So let's go over to our shader. And I'm going to keep the glossy layered weight up, but I'm going to increase the roughness so that it should spread that gloss. And then I'm going to turn that glossy color to more of a brown. So that the color that's spread over is kind of softer and more in line with the type of material that I want. Turn the reflectivity down, the roughness up. Turn that weight down just a bit. And I also am not big on having pure white in my base color. And sometimes I'll take whatever my color is, whatever my diffuse texture is, and I'll shove that into the base bump. Just to bring out a little bit more of to take some of the color channel and shove it into that surface as well, and it just kind of amps up the noisiness of it a bit. Just a little there. Give that a second to catch up. So, let's zoom in nice and close on this. You can see what we're getting. So I'm really really pretty happy with this. Really like the look we've got going there. So now that I'm pretty happy with my materials, I'm going to go back out the texture shaded so we can move around a little faster. Then let's just go to Edit, Figure, Transfer Utility. Then I'm going to grab the G3 Mail, and I'm going to grab my ghillie suit pullover. And under projection template, let's do full body and accept. So now that will be converted to a figure and conformed or fitted to our G3 Mail. And where I have some pieces that hang, I'm going to add some body parts just to make things a little more posable. So if I right click, and let's go to ghillie suit pullover pelvis. Then I'll go into my joint editor. And we could add child bones from the pelvis, but I actually prefer to click on a thigh and then right click and hit create sibling. Okay. So we create that sibling, and that's created with the same orientation, same orientation as our thigh. So then I'm going to keep that auto aligned, pull those end points over. And then I'm going to right click, go to edit, rename node. This is going to be L dangle 1. I'm putting a 1 on it just in case. I don't know if I'm going to end up having a second one at some point or not. So L dangle 1 and accept. I see where in the chat Gina said I get all rigging, JCMs, and morphs done, then texture. Um, Gina, there's no right or wrong way to do it. If that's what you're comfortable with, then go for it. I personally like working in a way that I feel is organic. I like to see, pardon me, Rebecca brought me Starbucks, so you hear that slurp. That's my coffee. But I like to work in a way that I feel is a little more organic. And if I block off too much of my work, if I say, okay, today, in this session I'm modeling, in this session I'm doing UVs, in this session I'm doing rigging, in this session I'm doing textures. If I block it off and segment the process like that, then I find it slows me down ridiculously. That's just me. And maybe other people will do it how they'll do it. I find that so many aspects of doing this relate to each other that if you can combine them all into kind of one block of workflow, things tend to get done much faster. My understanding is that I'm pretty quick at this, and I think that that's part of it. Is I don't think of it in terms of steps, like you might want to break it up into. I think of it as it's more like a puzzle. It's not like a recipe where where you start with an ingredient, you do what you do to that ingredient, then you add another ingredient, then you add another ingredient. A lot of people want to treat this like a recipe or a set of building instructions, but I don't think of it that way at all. I think of it more like building a puzzle, where you have you might start with the border, but then you might not get all of the border done because you may get just a corner put together, and then out of the corner of your eye you may see a piece laying there that will fit in there, and you just go ahead and put it in. So I tend to think of it in a more holistic sort of way, so that I'm not bound to a set process. Now I know that in teaching it and in trying to help other people get better at it, that can be a little weird, because it's much easier, I think, for people to think about things in terms of step 1, do this, step 2, do this. But in helping folks try and become more productive, hopefully more profitable for themselves, one of the things that I want them to try and pick up is this sort of holistic approach to the entire process. So that's it's kind of a personal philosophy. I don't look at it. I don't look at it as those kind of steps. I don't want to break it down that way, because then I'll get fixated on one given part and not see the whole thing. I really, really don't like doing that. So anyway, that's kind of why I go about it the way I do. And the other thing too is I like instant gratification. I want to see something right then and there. I don't want to wait until the very end to see textures on something. I really want to see as much as I can see, as fast as I can see it. So I tend to work this way. So that being the case, I'm going to keep adding some of the extra bones. Okay, so let's go to my L-Phi again, and I'm going to create another sibling. And then I'm going to pull that guy off and rename that to rear dangle 1. Then I'm going to go to my right thigh, create sibling bone. Then I'll select that. Sure that I didn't thoroughly screw something up. There we go. So right thigh bend 2 will be the name that comes in on that. And then I will edit, rename. This is going to be R dangle 1. Okay. And then we'll just move that into place. And looks like I could probably add, you know, I thought about adding another dangle piece here in the front, but I'm not going to. I'm going to leave that to work mostly from the thigh. Although, you know what? Actually, let's do that. Let's add a dangle, but we're going to make it a child of that thigh. So create child bone, and we're going to call this R dangle 2, and its rotation order is going to be YZX. And the reason I made that a child of the right thigh, keep that selected, that'd be great. There we go. The reason I made that a child of the right thigh, and actually as I look at these, I'm thinking about making all of those children of the thighs, would be that then they would actually follow the thighs, and you wouldn't need to use them as a tweak. You would use them just as extra movement on top of the thighs. So let's make that change. Let's go ahead and do that. So let's take this dangle and we'll just reparent it in place. So edit, reparent, and I want to make that a child of L thigh bend. L thigh bend. That's okay. We'll push through that. Then this guy back here is a child of the pelvis. That's fine. We'll keep that one that way. Then this one, I'm going to edit, reparent, R thigh bend. That's fine. And that one already was. Okay. So next, let's go ahead and make some groups that will correspond with these guys. So here I'm back in my geometry editor, and I'm just going to grab a few polys right there and expand my selection. The key command for that is Control and the plus sign on your number pad. Gina asks, what are the benefits of sibling bones versus and child bones? A sibling bone, like if I select a thigh and I create a sibling bone, then it's at the same level of hierarchy as the thigh. So it would be a child of the pelvis. It's really something they included, I think, as just a different option of a way to create new bones. And it really is just a matter of mindset. Like if I'm looking at something and I think, oh yeah, I need something that you know is going to dangle along with the thigh, then I might make it a sibling. If I need something that's going to dangle from the thigh, I'd make it a child. So let's go ahead and right-click, create group from selected, and this is going to be, let's see, L dangle 1. Then let's just grab a few polys back here. Give ourselves enough to be able to select with, and that's going to be rear dangle 1. Then let's grab this stuff, and that's going to be R dangle 1. And if you wanted to just be 100% accurate in your naming, you could actually just click and let it select the name of the bone and hit copy, and then we can just paste that in. Okay. So now we need to get our joint editor and set our assignments for each of these. So we're on R dangle 2, so let's grab that. Then let's go to R dangle 1. that. Then L dangle 1. Grab that. And what this is just assigning mesh to these bones. It really has nothing to do with the rigging other than it just tells the program polygons to associate with the bone so it can be selected in the viewport. So then we have rear dangle. There we go. And then also I noticed that I still have this blank default group. So let's just get rid of that. Pardon me. So now that we have those groups in place, we can do some quick skin weights. And I'm going to turn off respect selection on this. Go with a pretty good brush size. And then, there we go. Let's just smooth this a bit. Okay, that one. And let's grab angle 2. Give it a little love. And I like that I can use this controller up here to move it without having to switch out of my my skin weight tool. That's just kind of a handy little trick. It's nice to be able to just move the joint around while you're editing the weights. Hard angle 1. Let's swing that out that way. I'm just painting over it and then holding control to smooth. Let's look at the rear angle. Take that on X a little bit. Throw some weight on it. And you could add as many bones as you want. You can get really kind of crazy granular with this. But sometimes I find that it's better to go kind of light with that. Simple is best. I don't like to overcomplicate things if I don't have to. So, one last thing is I want to make sure that I memorize the rigging. And then let's just save this into our libraries. Okay. All right, and this will be DVX. Ghillie suit pullover. And I want to double check my data names on this just to be sure I put it all in the same place. So start with Void Explorer. Yes. And hit accept. And I also want to make sure that I have this parented, just in case we need to do any linkages, any ERC freezing from the base figure out to the clothing. So let's change parent. Actually, much easier way to do that. Let's just collapse all of this business. We'll drag and drop that on the Genesis. So now let's save that one more time. So DVX. Where did it go? There we go. All right, so now that has been saved. And at this point, I'm going to take a short break. And when I come back, we're going to add the foliage elements on top of this. And that's really where we're going to get into some fun stuff. So this so far, I feel like, has probably been a lot of review. You've seen a lot of stuff done here that you've already seen in past sessions, but it's okay because as a good friend and teacher who I go to for a lot of, go to frequently, would say repetition is the mother of retention. So you repeat things to retain them. So seeing something again, just see it in a different way and see it applied, so hopefully you remember. So anyway, we're going to take a short break. Everyone stretch your legs, grab a drink, grab some coffee, and when we come back, we're going to be building some foliage. All right, so we are back. Now we get to get into some fun stuff. Before I go digging too much into the next bit of modeling we need to do, though, I want to make sure that I have everything generally where I want them as far as rigging. So obviously we got some skin weights to work with here for just a second. So got some fast ways of dealing with this. So let's grab the geometry editor, and we'll hit the plus sign next to the head group. I'll start expanding that out a bit. Then in my node weight map brush, I'll turn on respect selection, and I'm going to smooth selected. Then we'll grab neck upper, do the same. And neck lower, and do the same. And just expand that selection a little bit more. Maybe add a bit more weight to that lower neck. And then let's smooth it. The nice thing about something loose like this is you've got a lot of wiggle room. Yeah. And make sure that I go ahead and save that. And we're going to pop back over to Zbrush. And now we're about to start working on that foliage. So let's take a quick look at the chat, see if anyone has any questions on anything. Questions, comments, anything you'd like me to touch on before we get to digging in on this. Going to show you some really neat stuff here, though. So let's see where we can go with this. Alright, so let's go ahead and start working on the foliage. If anyone has any questions, please feel free to pop those off. So to do our foliage, there's a few things that we want to do first. I want to look at some references. And so I've pulled up some images. I'm also going to be using these images. Note these are labeled for reuse, so we're good. And I'm going to be using these images for generating some textures and also as a reference for the kind of meshes we're going to be making. Okay. So what I want to do, if we were to just Google ghillie suit, okay. Go to images. Here you can see there's a really nice very dense ghillie suit. We're just going to use some elements of that sort of thing. You know, we're not going to trick it out quite that far. What we're going to do, the way we're going to approach this, is creating a couple of different bundles of moss and twigs that we can then turn into an insert mesh and place all over our figure. So, a lot of different ways we could do that. And the way that I'm going to go about, I'm really going to combine a couple of different things here. We're going to make some twigs and things so we can break our silhouette in a big way. And then we're also going to create a texture that's going to go on some sheets that will dangle. So let's go ahead and start with the creation of that texture. Okay, and I'm going to use some elements from these photos to do that. So I'm going to open Photoshop for a moment. And let's do a 2048 by 2048 image. Then in my browser, I'm just going to right click, copy image, and then paste. And I'll duplicate the layer where I pasted so that I'm working on a duplicate and I can go back at any point that I need to. I'm going to start off with this pushing my levels. Control L is a levels command. I'm going to push my levels so that I really bring out the lights and darks in the image. And the reason for this is I'm actually going to create a mask. And I'm just using image editing tools to create what will become a mask that's going to let me pull elements out of the original photo. So let's also go through here with dodge and burn tools. Just creating more contrast there so that we can pull an easier mask. I want to darken shadows. And be careful how far you go. And starting to get there. All right. Pull up my levels command again, push that a little further. Now, set my colors to default. I'm just going to grab a normal brush and swing around here. Something's a little softer. And I know I'm flying pretty fast because this is Photoshop, and I kind of have an assumption that everybody generally has a pretty good working knowledge of Photoshop. If there's anything I'm doing that you have questions about, you know, Photoshop related questions, let me know, and I will get to those as quick as I can. Here I'm going back and using my, what is that? I always get them mixed up. The burn tool. burn in from the outside of this area. Okay. Now I'm going to desaturate it. That's Control-Shift-U on your keyboard. And we're just going to keep going forward with more of that. Again, Levels command. And then let's grab something that's kind of noisy. Just finish breaking up that outer edge. And I'm going to change my my brush settings a little bit here too, so that we get some spacing, and then we get some jitter. I want a whole lot of angle jitter. Maybe even some scattering. Now we can really break up that outer edge the rest of the way. Of course, I haven't moved this at all, so if we were to turn that off, turn that layer off and back on, or if we turn its opacity down, you can see what it corresponds to over our original photo. So I know that I don't need anything that's out of bounds here, so I'm going to go ahead and crop this image. Then I will select all in this layer. Now I'm going to click on this layer, create a layer mask, go to my channels, I'm going to turn off everything but the layer mask and hit paste. And that's going to paste that black and white data that I copied into my layer mask. So now, if I make my background layer black, I have my photo elements through a layer mask. Just delete that layer. So now we have a really viable piece to build a transmap from and to use as a texture map. So next thing I'm going to do is apply that layer mask, and we're just going to change the size on this a little bit, warp it a little. And this is going to be our gilly foliage map. So I'm going to put a background color behind this because in the texture channel it would bleed over from where the opacity is going to be. So I want a color behind it, and I'm going to save this as stuff, Explorer, textures. I'm going to save this as a JPEG. This is going to be DVX Gilly Suit Foliage 1 texture. Okay. Then I put a white color overlay so that I don't have any of the photo toning showing through. The white overlay on that layer and hide my color, the background color that I added. And then this is going to be our transmap. Okay. Then the last thing I want to do is create a composite of my layers, desaturate it, and I'll go into Filter, X Normal, Height to Normals, and hit Continue, and that is going to be my normal map. This is one of the few times that I actually like using the Photoshop plugin method for creating normal maps. Okay, so now we have that element. We have our foliage element in place. And we could totally repeat those steps to create a couple variations on this so that we would have different foliage materials. I'm not going to repeat those steps because I don't want to, I don't want to spend that much more time on that element. So let's go over now and grab, let's grab some moss. Do we want the moss? Actually, no, we're not going to use that. The next thing I want to do is start spraying. I say spraying. I'm going to be using fiber mesh to place strips that are going to give us kind of the fluff and body of our ghillie suit. River asks, where did I get that plugin? It's called X Normal. If you just Google X Normal, it's a plugin that's actually part of a program as well. There's a free program called X Normal where you can take a low-res mesh and a high-res version of that mesh that's been sculpted and use X Normal to compare the two and create normal maps in a way very similar to what Zbrush does with your sculpting in Zbrush. I still prefer Zbrush over X Normal for a lot of reasons, but it's kind of cool. It's got some handy stuff in that program, and my favorite thing that comes out of X Normal is that when you download it, you get this plugin for Photoshop. So let's go into our pullover, and I want to add some masking. Let's turn up my resolution, and then add masking. Really kind of all over. So let's just masking. There we go. More masking. And going down a couple of subdivisions. Don't want the texture turned on. I want to be able to see my masking and everything clearly. Then let's sharpen our mask, and then shrink our mask back from the edges a little bit because I don't want it to go all the way to the edge. And I want this to have some randomness to it. That's why I'm just kind of spraying around. So there we have our masking. So now let's go into fiber mesh, and let's turn on preview. Then I'm going to set my coverage pretty high. That way we get these wide strips. And if we have a high coverage and a lower number of fibers, you'll see the strips get wider. And in the preview, if I want to be able to preview what my texture is going to look like in these strips, I'll go to Texture, Import, and I'll just use my transmap. Bring that in. Now, of course, I need to flip it vertically because Zbrush will try to flip those when I export it. So then inside fiber mesh, we'll just apply that texture. I always hit no on that that little thing that pops up. I'll always hit no on that. And then we'll turn up the transparency. And now we can start getting a good representation of how this is going to play out on our final piece. So I'm going to turn my number of fibers down. And I've got my coverage cranked all the way up, but I'm still not getting real wide strips. It's because my width profile is too shallow. So if I bring this up, okay, here we can start getting wider strips. Then there I'm just playing with my length profile a little bit so that stuff starts to push out. Then let's work with the gravity profile a bit. And if we grab that curve and we move it, you'll see we can really get some fine control over the effect of gravity on these fibers. And I like that as a starting point for a lot of things. So next, I want to increase my segments so that it has more mesh to work with and it'll be able to drape a little better. So we're only going to 6 segments, but if we look, you know, we have a good number of strips out here. Right now we have 5,000 fibers, and at 6 segments, that's going to be around 30,000 polys. So it's a little higher poly count than what I like to work to on a lot of stuff, but you know, when you're trying to do pretty photorealistic kinds of work, this is a good ballpark to be in. Width. If we remove the right-hand corner of that curve down on the width profile, you see that it tapers out. I want to keep these pretty flat though. Then also, I want to play around a little bit with how it's distributing these fibers. So I really don't want it to be by area. I want a little more even distribution. So I want to turn that completely off and just leave it set by mask to 1. Now let's bring that coverage down just a little bit at a time until we see it open up just a touch. Get much, get much. There we go. Okay. So I'm going to use this same setting for the more detailed elements in a moment. Right now I'm going to go ahead and hit accept. But before I do, I'm going to save this preset. So let's just save this. I'll save this right here for now. And we'll call this Gilly Foliage. That way I have this fiber mesh preset that I can go back to in a minute when I start adding some of the draping elements coming from the little branches that we're about to make. So hit accept. No. So we're actually at 70,000 polys on that, but I am going to I'm going to keep that because I think that gives us a good density. Now I'm just going to come in with my move tool and move this stuff around a little bit. Yeah, actually, you know what? I think that is too dense. I changed my mind. I'm going to go back on that. So let's just delete that subtool, turn on preview, and I'm going to bring my segments down to like three or four. Let's do 4. And then let's turn our fibers down from 5 to 3. That might be a bit too much. Let's go to 4. That's not bad. And then increase that coverage. Increase it. I really want gravity to do its job. So now, save that and accept it. Okay, now we're at 40,000. That's much more workable. And don't need Photoshop anymore, so I'm going to go ahead and kill that. All right. So I'm going to do some basic reshaping here with the move brush. And there are a lot of things that you can do with fiber mesh. It's kind of crazy. We can use clipping brushes to really tighten this stuff in if we wanted. There's a lot that can be done. Here I'm smoothing just to relax some of this back a bit. Then I'm going to use a groomer. Let's use groom hair along. I'm going to set the Z intensity on that down a bit. And I'm going to turn off my symmetry. I'm going to use that to help kind of pull these fibers so that they dangle. Then at any point using fiber mesh, you can control click and paint just like you would masking in regular meshes, but it works a little differently. It'll mask by fibers. That's kind of handy. Okay. Let's mask some of these. And if we keep this as fiber mesh, then we're also able to save a ZTL and come back and use the fiber mesh grooming tools to create variations on the shape that will apply as morph targets. So that's particularly handy. Okay. So now I want to send this over to DAZ Studio. Let's name this Ghillie Suit, EVX Ghillie Suit Foliage. Ghillie Suit. Call it Fluffy Foliage. And I'll hit Control G. We'll send that over to DAZ Studio. Okay, and we do not want to turn that into a subdivision surface. That would be a huge poly count. So this is how that comes in. And I am immediately going to select it, go into my geometry editor. I'm going to name that surface Fluffy Foliage. Then I'm going to turn that into an iRay Uber. And I'm going to paste material from my pullover surface, just so that I get my maps, my map navigation oriented into the folder I want. And I do believe I need to flip my UVs on this, because Zbrush likes to be a little wonky with that. So let's just go ahead and do that right now. We'll flip those vertically, fiber mesh UVs, and flip them vertically. Hit Control G and send that over again. And then this time we're just going to replace our UVs. Okay. So we'll turn all that off, hit Update UVs. There we go. Now we're facing the right direction. I love that. I love the way that works. So now I want to set my glossy color to black, because I don't want really any gloss on this at all. Base bump. Let's plug our trans map into that since it's grayscale. And then let's go grab a normal map. And now let's go grab our trans map, plug that into the opacity. Now I'm going to rig that from the pullover, not from the G3 figure. The reason is that where I added those extra bones into the pullover, I want those to transfer into this foliage. So let's go to Edit, Figure, Transfer Utility. My scene item is going to be the ghillie suit pullover. Then my target is going to be suit fluffy foliage. And we'll just leave all of this as is, hit accept, and then I'm going to grab suit fluffy foliage and fit that in G3 figure. And it's trying to fight with me, so I'm going to cancel that. I don't like that it's doing that. So what I need to do now is transfer one more time, just so that it recognizes that this should fit the G3 figure. Where I built it over the pullover, though, it has the pullover's extra bones, and that's a good thing. And we might even... Actually, we could just leave it as is so that it follows the pullover and not the G3 figure. That's probably a better route to go. Let's stick with that. Might seem a little unorthodox, but it's pretty effective. Okay. Now let's grab suit fluffy foliage. And I'm going to save that. So there we have our foliage, our fluffy foliage saved. And then if we wanted, we could add some morphs to that real quick. Just come in. Let's turn on symmetry. And I'm going to do one morph just so you see it done. I'm going to call this fluff. Actually, let's undo that. Go back a little bit. Back. So, and we could also just alter, if we wanted to alter the overall shape, we could do that really easily and then just have it update the shape through the GoZ plugin, which I'm quite fond of. I love the way that works. So let's call this one Fluff. Update existing object, hit accept. So the name on this is going to be Fluff, and we'll put that under General Actor foliage. That's to create property groups so that you have a nice grouping for your controllers and dials and whatnot. You just right click in here and hit create, and then you can type that stuff in. So let's hit accept, and foliage. So there you can see the results of that morph. We can fluff that out. I noticed over in the chat some folks having some problems with the stream. Everything here shows that our internet connection should be solid, so I'm not sure what will be up with that. The indicator on YouTube says that our stream health is a green light, so we should be good. Not sure what's going on. Interesting. I'm going to pop back over here and take a quick look at the foliage now via iRay. So let's let that load up. And that might take a minute just because it's a lot of transparency. Poly counts get much higher. I would imagine that's going to chug for just a minute. There we go. So, let's take a look at our foliage material in just a moment. I'm going to bring my base color down to more of a green-brown. And I'm pretty happy with that. So let's save that. Foliage. And let's kick it back into texture shaded view. And we're going to finish this up now by adding some twigs and things going around the hood, and then having more foliage coming from those. So to do that, I'm going to go back onto the hood. And that fiber mesh really makes ZBrush drag, so I'm going to hide that for the moment. And let's just mask the hood like so. So remember, we saved our fiber mesh preset for creating those strands for foliage. So now we're going to go back into fiber mesh and we're going to create our twigs using that. So let's go, we have our hood masked, let's go into fiber mesh, let's turn on our preview, and let's just turn our max fibers way, 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 way down. And we don't need this texture on here anymore. And we're going to turn our profile up to 4. And what that's going to give us is tubes. So whenever you have a profile of more than one is going to give you flat strips. Anything higher than that is going to give you a tube with that many sides. So let's turn our segments up a little bit. Then we're going to turn coverage down, and here you see we start to get these dangling tubes. So let's turn gravity, let's just reset gravity. And this down. Then length down, because we don't want these to be too awful long. Then scale the tip down so that they, and then let's use the width profile. So now we get these little twig sort of shapes. Now the shape that they make while we're in preview mode here really isn't going to matter a whole lot because we're going to alter that shape after we commit. Now let's just gradually turn up our number of fibers. And I'm going to play around with the embed setting just a little bit. But that's fine because they really should just kind of poke through anyway. So let's scale the roots down. And then also play with our width curve a bit. We can play with these tangents a little bit and get it sort of starting to lay on the mesh. A few more fibers. Length up just a touch. Probably a bit too much right there. It's not bad. Let's accept that and see what we get. Okay, we're at 19,000 polys with that. I'm going to live with that. So I'm going to turn on symmetry now with my move brush after having accepted. We're just going to grab all of these and pull them out. That way they're all going out from the hood. There you can see the mesh that we have for those. And I kind of like what we have. Not bad. Not bad. Let's inflate that and make sure that we have enough thickness. And then I'm going to go back through and smooth some of it here and there. I'm not liking that. So let's delete that and generate it again. You, not you. There we go. Let's generate that again. This time, I want to go a little longer with it. And I want to clamp my width profile in a little bit more. Yeah. I want the tips set to 0, so those tighten up. There we go. That's much twiggier looking. And I'm also going to turn my segments down so I can get a lower poly count and get more of an angled sort of look. Except, now we can go down to that layer, or excuse me, that subtool. And I want to move some of this so that I make sure it's not intersecting with the figure underneath. So to do that, I'm going to turn off Smooth in my Geometry tab and divide once. And that's going to break it away from fiber mesh based settings so I can then move it. So really what I'm created is almost like a big bundle of forms. And now I'll delete that higher subdivision and it goes back to being normal fiber mesh, so I can pull and push on things from there. Okay. So now comes the really nifty part of how do I hang foliage from this, okay? Before I do that, I want to make sure that I have a texture that I can use on this. I don't really need to paint a texture on this if I have some kind of a tiling wood texture that I can use on it. So I'm going to hop out and navigate to where I know I have a texture that I can pull. So. So let's grab this, and these are just some standard textures that I've been using for years that are kind of internal, but we distribute them all the time in a lot of products. So I'm going to include those here. And I'll rename them just for the sake of packaging. To be PVX foliage wood texture, and then wood normal map. Okay, and that one's a PNG, so I need to convert that real quick. So let's just open that here. Boom. Well, that was interesting, and not in a good way. All right. So now we have our textures that we need. We can that. So now, here comes the fun part. Let's go ahead and load this texture in. Textures, here we go. Now let's pop that in here. Skip this note. UV map on this should be fiber mesh. There we go. Now we can see our texture in place. So now I need to have a little bit more mesh there because we're going to do some masking and we need a little bit more resolution in place for that masking to hold. So I'm going to subdivide twice. But I have smooth turned off, which is fine. Now, this is fiber mesh, and fiber mesh has square UVs. Now, this gives us an interesting tool in that we can use this gradient in our alpha to mask, basically to mask the roots. So if we hit mask by alpha, now that we have this gradient loaded in, you'll see how it masks off. And then let's sharpen that mask and then invert it. Now what I'm doing here is I'm using this alpha to mask only the tips of these twigs. So then once those tips are masked, let's just... we could add more twigs growing out of them if we wanted. But I want to just go ahead and grow some foliage dangling. So let's turn on fiber mesh now, fiber mesh preview, and we'll hit open. And then I'm going to go grab the preset that we made. And now we're just going to dial down the amount quite a bit. We don't really need a whole lot there. We'll start to play with some of the settings a bit. So I really want it to, I want gravity on this to have kind of a delayed effect so that you get this breakup in the shape. There we go. Now we've got that dangle that I want. And raise that, set it to 2. And now we can accept that. And we have our the foliage to go on the twigs on the hood of the ghillie suit. So now, make sure that our foliage, our hood foliage, has UVs. So we'll go into our UV map, put fiber UVs, and remember we want to flip that vertically. So, and then here are our twigs. Those have UVs. Those are good. And I'm going to go down and delete those upper subdivisions on the twigs because we don't need that. And I'm going to send this over in 2 parts because if we have this separated, then we could apply just the twigs for that particular look, and then we can add the foliage to them. So let's go ahead and name this DVX Ghillie Suit Hood Twigs. And then we'll name this other piece DVX Ghillie Suit Hood Foliage. Okay. So now let's send the hood twigs over. And we don't want it to convert to a subdivision surface. So now let's select our hood twigs. Okay. And same process as before. When we send something over from GoZ, the material is not going to have a name. So we'll go into the geometry editor, we'll go into our surfaces, and I'm going to call this twigs, so now it has a name. And then I'll convert it to the IRA Uber base. And then I'm going to navigate to my texture. Zoom in on this. See it there. And I'm going to go ahead. I know what I'm going to want to bring this into some brown. Then let's go down and get our normal map. And now I'm going to use the transfer utility. And again, I want to use the pullover and not the G3 figure. And there's my suit hood twigs, my pullover. Hit accept. And now that should be fitted to the pullover. There we go. Picks up its skin weights really nicely. So now let's bring over our ghillie suit hood foliage. So again, Control G, and we'll send this over. Do not convert. Hit accept. And I want to take a quick look at my fluffy foliage and see that our material name on that is fluffy foliage. And I think I'm going to change the name on that to just foliage. And then copy it. Go ahead and save that too. So we have foliage. Yes, yes. It's good. Saving. Okay. So I changed the material name on that to foliage because on my hood foliage, I want to give it the same name, and then we could share material settings. So if you wanted to save out different kinds of foliage with those transmaps and so on, then those materials could apply across both of these. So, and then also that makes it easier for me to get materials for the hood foliage because now I can grab this material, right click it, okay, I'll copy it, then come here, and I need to convert that one to IRA first. And now I'll paste it, and we have that material in place. So the last thing I need to do is transfer my rigging again from the pullover, and this is going to be into my hood foliage. Just hit accept, and there we have pretty decent ghillie suit, I think. So let's go ahead and save these. So right now we have our ghillie suit hood twigs. So I'll just click in there so it can grab that figure name, and that's what I'm going to save this as. And then we'll grab hood foliage. And I don't know if we have any poses handy. I'm wondering if I made any for this yet. Just for the gun. Well, let's just grab. Oh, nope, do not want to delete him. That was bad. Don't do that. Let's grab a Genesis 3 male, and we'll just use some of the posing dials that are on him real quick to put this in a pose. Go arms. Let's do arms down. And bring that out. Oops. Down. And this is really just so I can kind of see um, everything in place. Make sure that all this stuff is generally working the way I want it to. So far, so good. You can see there how where we made those extra bones on the ghillie suit itself, how they follow the legs because of where we put them. So then we can go to them and easily have them dangle, but they still follow the legs. So. Now, let's just take a look at this inside iRay. And it's going to take it a minute. So while that's processing, I'm going to take a look over the chat and see if anyone has any questions. I know I kind of blasted through quite a bit, but a lot of it still is using things that I've shown before. So hopefully you're starting to catch some of the repetition of techniques and how they get applied in all kinds of different ways, from project to project. And there it is in iRay, and we see the whole completed look. And of course, I've used this here for a ghillie suit, but you could use it for, for fur, for all kinds of cool stuff. There's all kinds of things you could use this for and use these techniques for. But that is going to give us pretty much everything that I want in this character set. We can go from the basic grunt to the Sarge to pulling out this ghillie suit and putting it on there. I think I am going to do one more session. I have to look at my scheduling a little bit. I think I might do one more session that does the sniper rifle that I wanted to do for the Ranger. So, but you folks can interact with me on that. You'll talk to me, tell me if you'd like to see another installment that deals with some a little more hard surface and prop development like that. If there's a call for it, if you guys would like that, then I'll go ahead and include that. I think it's a good idea, but I will kind of defer to you guys as a group because I know we've been on this look and these characters for a bit. So. And I don't want you guys to get project fatigue watching the same sort of stuff every week. So anyway, talk to me about that a little bit. Tell me what you think. I'll probably go ahead and well, here's what I'll do. If everyone likes the idea of doing another session with some modeling related to this guy and this kit and series of kits, then I will schedule one more session where I do the gun that I want to go with it. Then, if that's the case, then I'll push off my rendering session for another week. Otherwise, I think we're just about ready to wrap this series up. Really, what I would like to cover still in this as a complete package of videos and seminar sessions would be the gun, the rendering, and a little bit on creating some poses. Because I know there's a lot of call from people. A lot of folks have a bit of trouble wrapping their heads around doing posing. And posing, from a business standpoint, posing is really a good thing to do. So I'm kind of thinking out loud here but I really want some input from you folks who watch this. You know, we've got a nice group of you guys who come pretty much every week, and so I don't want to peel out of this series too fast. If you guys want to see some more in this, I'm just letting you know kind of this is where my head is at and where I want to go with it from here. Would be the gun, some posing, and final rendering. So, but I am totally cool to just jump ahead to the final rendering if you guys would like to finish this out and get this stuff behind us soon. So I'm going to watch the chat for a minute, and hopefully it's always a little weird trying to interact through this because there is the lag between what goes out on video and what comes through the chat. So let's see. Okay, yeah, Loki said, I thought this series was supposed to run until mid-December. You know, that's the thing, man. It can run until mid-December. I want to listen to the people a little bit too, though, and see if they want me to, because I can see where I could cut this off soon and get onto some other things stylistically. But the actual work involved in this has a lot of good things to learn. So I'm kind of torn. I could go either way on that. I just want to listen to the folks watching. So Henrico mentions poses. I enjoy posing. Creating my own poses. I'd like to know more about creating partial poses. Okay. Susan says, yes, please. I'm going to take that she wants me to continue. So I would like to, so I'm thinking so far then the response is definitely to finish this out the rest of the way. Let's see. So I'm going to change my plans then. Next week I was going to do some stuff on rendering. But I think what I'll do for the Thanksgiving session, which won't be live, remember that one's going to be pre-recorded, but for the Thanksgiving session, I'll do the gun. I'll do the gun for the Thanksgiving session, and then we'll do 2 sessions after that. So next week will be some hard surface modeling, texturing, and getting that into place. Then the following week is going to deal with posing. So we've got one last round of modeling. Then the following week will be posing. Then coming up after that, we'll round it out with a nice long session on nothing but iRay and just getting really sweet looking renders and iRay settings in place. So how's that sound, everyone? Does that sound like a winner? So we're doing modeling for Thanksgiving, then modeling for Thanksgiving, then posing the following week, and then the week after that is rendering. And that will bring this rather epic series of seminars to a close on the character development. This kind of fully realized character development series. Turkey coma that day. Actually, Gina, I hope to be somewhere down in the bowels of eastern Kentucky that day, hanging out with my family. So we shall see. We shall see. So it seems like we've got a consensus on that schedule and that plan. So you guys can quote me on that, remind me of it, or whatever, and we'll be back. We'll be back each week, finish that out. Now the plan after we finish this series, that'll leave a couple of weeks in December where I'm going to be doing some kind of catch up, some pickup sessions, where I'm really just going to be fielding questions mostly, looking at small topics, and just kind of troubleshooting things that folks want to get into. And Loki would remind me of geoshells. So geoshells are going to be covered in one of the pickup seminars. Gina says, what do we do after that? Oh, there's always more to come. So, after this series is finished in 3 weeks, then we're going to do some pickup sessions through the rest of December. That will be to just kind of pick up little tips and tricks, small stuff that folks may have some questions about, some wondering issues with. Then come January, we're going to kind of reboot this whole process of the artist development seminars. We're going to be going to a bi-weekly public format and then a bi-weekly vendors-only format. So if you like getting this kind of training weekly, I would really encourage you to bring some products aboard CGBytes, because otherwise you'll be able to come to the public sessions each week, but those are probably going to go back through a lot of stuff that you've already seen covered, which is fine. I mean, repetition is great, and it's never exactly the same way twice. But the vendor sessions are going to be much more interactive, and because it will be vendor specific, it will be vendor directly content artist oriented. So if you're selling at CGBytes, these will be specially crafted just for you guys. Those will be done through Google Hangouts. I'll be able to see your screens if you like. You don't have to participate that way if you don't want, but I'll be able to see your screens and actually give you direct hands-on assistance, which to my knowledge is something no one in our field does. Oh, Gina says her birthday is on a Friday. Does that mean she can pick? We'll talk. We will talk. So yeah, make sure that in order to be eligible for those alternate weeks that are vendor specific, that are private to vendors, make sure that you have products, because I mean you can sign up to be a CGBytes content artist, CGBytes vendor, CGBytes content artist. You can sign up, and that's great. But specifically, those sessions are going to be for folks who have product in the store. So make sure that you at least have something in testing before January, so that you can be eligible for that. Okay, that's at the end of all of this. I mean, this is all all of these things are part of our business. It's part of the CGBytes business. It's what I do for a living. It's what a lot of you guys do either for a living or as a supplemental income. And so I want to make sure that we have that component addressed a little more directly than what we've done so far. So far, this has all been really mostly just about developing art skills and developing more skills at creating this kind of art. When we go into those vendor seminars, that's going to be professional. That's going to deal with working with a lot more of the minutia of what it takes to create good products that can perform well, that users enjoy, that will sell well, and it's going to deal with a lot of the kind of questions that people moving into the business aspect of this field are going to run into. So there's a whole other mindset that I'm looking forward to bringing to the table for everybody there. That's actually not really appropriate to bring to a public forum like these have been. So, but if that's something you're excited about and you really are looking forward to, which I encourage it, make sure you have some content going up at CGBytes so that you can be eligible for those sessions. So that pretty much brings things to a close for today. If anyone has any questions or comments from here, Sorry, I know there was a thing about Spotlight earlier that I did not get into. I will keep that in mind and try to address it, or that question can be brought to me outside of here, and I could probably help you with it personally too. So, but that really wraps it up for today. I'll take a moment to kind of let the chat kind of simmer and see if there's any questions or comments anyone has for me. Anything you guys would like for me to tackle before I go. The content that was made during the seminar here today is going to have a little bit more polish added to it, and that will be released either Monday or Tuesday as the freebie from this week's seminar. So let's see. So it's cool. I see you see folks kind of talking amongst themselves. It's great. It's one of the things I've enjoyed about this actually is this weekly thing. I've seen folks start to talk to each other and kind of interact in a really cool way. It's nice to be a part of something like that. So I'm going to call that a close. We are done for today. I won't see you live next week. Next week is going to be pre-recorded, but we'll be back the following week with another live session. So till then, thank you all for coming out, for watching. Hope you picked up some things that are interesting that you play around with. Be sure to show me your renders, show me what you're working on. Reach out to me through Facebook or Twitter or Skype, and make sure that you show some love to CGBytes. Good folks, and good store, good place to bring your stuff to. So look forward to seeing more of y'all's content coming in there, and look forward to seeing you guys back here in 2 weeks. So until then, keep it real, make some good artwork. Thanks.